Hi everyone, I'm Esti Marcus, a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in trauma. Last time I did a live, the topic was on stuckness. Actually, let me wait another moment. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to begin. So I'm Esti Marcus, licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in trauma. And tonight's topic is called Taking Chances to Create Change. Last time I spoke, I did this live, I spoke about stuckness. And that's a topic that's really important to me because I really see it as the core of human suffering is caused by getting stuck in stuckness, which means that the core of healing would be moving out of stuckness. And the main goal that I see in therapy is to help someone move out of stuckness. And I think that one of the core ways to move out of stuckness is taking chances. And the ability to continuously take chances allows for growth and change. So there are many elements in therapy and in the healing process that contribute to growth and healing. There's the therapeutic relationship, there's the supportive environment, there's processing of trauma or stories or emotions. There's also the opportunity to maybe be seen and understood for some people for the first time in their lives. And all of those are extremely important to contributing to healing and change. But I think what it all boils down to is the ability to feel safe enough to take chances. And it's the practice of taking chances that actually leads to change. So tonight I'm going to talk about taking chances to create change. And I've broken it down into 5 steps that I think can be useful for us to take chances to create change. So the first step in creating change is that, and this is the first step, but it's also the most important step. And this is that it needs to be safe enough. Now, many people have experienced a lot of trauma in their childhood. Maybe they didn't experience environments that were safe enough. And many of us don't actually know or come into adulthood not actually knowing what safe enough actually is. A lot of times we grow up in environments that are actually not only not safe enough, but they're dangerous. And yet, since it's the only option that we have, it's the only environment that we have available to us, we think that it's safe enough, but it's actually not safe enough. So the first step in taking chances is to be able to accurately assess that an environment is safe enough for taking chances. Now, safety is never about a guarantee, and it's never about absolute. So when we're talking about safety, we're only ever talking about safe enough. We're not talking about absolute safety and a guarantee of safety. And even if you think about ideas of security, like if you're in a country or a city where there's security, or if you're worried about safety, it's never about a guarantee of safety. Or even if you have alarms in your house and guards outside of your home, it's about creating an environment where it's safe enough to be able to let your guard down because other factors are making sure that things are safe enough. So one of the ways to assess for safe enough, and it's not like a scientific formula, but it's just one that I'll delineate for us. And that's if the choice that you're about to make is at least 3 steps removed from the dangerous consequence, then perhaps you're in an environment of safe enough. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there are some choices that we make that it's inevitable. If I make this choice, something dangerous is almost guaranteed to happen. So if I run across a highway without looking, and it's a busy intersection, it's almost a guarantee that I'm going to either get hit by a car or cause an accident. So the space between the choice and the outcome, the dangerous outcome, is very short, and it's just one step removed. As opposed to some other choices that we might make that are further removed from a dangerous outcome. For example, if I communicate how I feel honestly with a certain person, there's a possibility that they might think that I'm weird for communicating that way, or they might judge me. There's also a possibility that they might not judge me. Okay. And then if they do judge me, and maybe they say something mean to me in response, there's a possibility that that will cause so much hurt and damage inside of me that it will humiliate me and really make me feel terrible. And if I have many, many experiences of being humiliated and feeling terrible, maybe I might be in an environment where I never wanted to communicate again, and maybe it can even cause debilitating anxiety or harm. But there would have to be so many factors, so many steps in order for it to be actually a life-threatening choice. So if there's more than 3 steps or 3 probabilities for it to be a life-threatening outcome, the chances are that it's an environment that's safe enough. I hope that's clear. If there's any questions about that, then hopefully people will let me know. So that's the first part in assessing for safe enough, is that it's not a guarantee. It's not a guaranteed or a likely outcome. There's like too many factors that need to first happen that are dependent on each other in order for it to actually be dangerous. So that's the first step for assessing whether something is safe enough. The second thing about safe enough is that it takes time. We can't always assess for safe enough in the first moment. We may need to feel it out, get a sense of the environment, get a sense of how people are, get a sense of what the responses are to first learn whether an environment is safe enough. The other thing for assessing whether something is safe enough is asking questions. You get a lot of information about whether something is safe enough by how someone responds to your questions. For example, if someone's asking a question or asking for something, they're saying, it really feels too loud in here, and it's making me feel very sensitive, so is it possible for you to lower the volume? And their answer to that question, the response is, you're so needy and ridiculous every single time. You always find something to complain about. Then that tells you something about whether the environment is safe enough, how far removed they are to responding in a way that doesn't feel emotionally safe. Alternatively, if you ask a question and someone responds with, I'm so happy that you communicated and let me know what you're needing, I'll see what I can do, then that also tells you something about the environment. So asking questions to assess whether an environment is safe enough is really important. And of course, related to this is, I want to stress very clearly that taking chances in an environment that is unsafe or not safe enough is not beneficial, it's harmful, it's reckless. So this is never about just take chances. Whenever you get a chance to take a chance, take a chance. That's not what this is about. It's about first assessing for safe enough, because otherwise it's reckless, or it can reinforce that the world is a dangerous place for you to take chances in. So it's really important for step number 1. And again, step number 1 can take a lot of time and feeling into and acclimating to an environment to really get a sense of whether something is safe enough. And it's also really important that we're no longer looking for absolute safety. We're not looking for guaranteed safety. We're looking for safe enough. So that's the first step for taking chances to create change. The second step for taking chances to create change is to experiment. One of my favorite things to do and to talk about is experimenting. And it's not only about the actions that we take, it's also about a stance that we have. An experimenter's stance, an experimenter's attitude is much more about gathering information and not being so invested in one particular outcome. And so an example of experimenting would be if you know that 99 times out of 100, you respond in a particular way to a particular situation, experiment with, well, what happens if I don't respond that way? If every time this group of people gets together and you hang out with them, you tend to get overly involved and talkative and overly engrossed in other people's details. And I'm not saying that that's a negative or a positive thing. It's just something that you find yourself doing a lot. Experiment with, well, what happens if I don't? What happens if I hold back in saying the thing that I normally would say? And to look at that with curiosity to find out, oh, what happens? And there's a lot of assumptions that we make about what is going to happen if we take a chance, if we make a different choice. But as an experimenter, you get to find out what actually happens if you take a step back and take a chance at trying something different. So the second step is experimenting. The third step is to build on what already works. So if you're trying to create change and you're not sure where to start with what feels easy, what feels like something that is doable. And I guess I should say not easy, but easy enough. Because if it were easy, you'd probably be doing it already. But if it's easy enough, use it as a place to start. So don't start with the hardest thing, start with the easier thing. So if there's someone who really would like to be more active and they hate exercising or they just don't have time for it, they never engage with it, find an exercise or a type of movement that feels easy for you, that feels enjoyable for you, that feels doable for you, and start there. And the reason for that, a lot of times we have this natural inclination to start with what's the most difficult for us. And it really almost always backfires. The satisfaction that we get from making progress, from starting with something easy, is very energizing, and it gives us momentum, and it reinforces for us that taking chances can feel good and can feel positive, and it can be effective. So we want to build on what's already easy, what's doable, what's working, and find the areas that feel easy enough as a place to begin, and to stay away from the things that feel really, really hard as a place to start. That's not where we want to start. So that's the third step. The fourth step is to create a practice of taking chances. Like anything, the more we practice it, the more it becomes part of our second nature, our way of operating. And the main goal in this is to be able to nurture courage. We want courage to become something that we really become friends with, we become accustomed to. And of course, courage is not about not being afraid. It's about taking chances when it's safe enough to, even when we're afraid. So we want to create a practice of taking chances. And it helps also if we're in an environment that encourages taking chances and can celebrate taking chances. Some examples of creating a practice of taking chances can really be as simple as changing things up. If every single day you take the same exact route to your office, try taking a different route. See what it's like. If every night when you're trying to fall asleep and you count sheep and you're counting from 1 to 100, try counting from 100 to 1. See what happens if you change it up. And so that's simply about making change. And it does take some courage. It does require some energy of taking chance, even just to create a small change. So get into the habit and the practice of taking chances to create change. And that's like the example where, and I don't know who to give the source to, or the proper respect for the source of it, but I definitely learned at one point in my life that if you have $100 to give to charity, rather than give $100 to one person, give $1 to 100 people, so that you get used to giving. And in the same way, we want to create a practice of taking chances. You want to get used to taking chances. The fifth step for taking chances to create change is not as, this is, by the way, this is not in any specific order except for the first one, that it's about creating an environment that's safe enough. The fifth step is asking for help and sharing your success. It is so important to have help when we're taking chances, when we're stepping into courage. And we want to be in an environment that's encouraging and that can celebrate the successes with us. And hopefully, if you're in a therapeutic relationship that really encourages and makes it safe to create change and take chances, hopefully that's an environment that's encouraging and celebrates your successes. And if you don't have that already set up for yourself, seek it out. And sometimes people have to pay a therapist to find an environment where they have someone who celebrates and encourages their taking of chances and creating change. So those are the 5 steps. Hopefully it was concise enough to be practical. I'm just going to review them quickly. The first one is creating an environment and finding an environment that's safe enough. The second one is experimenting, trying something different. The third step is building on what already works, starting with what's easy. The fourth step is creating a practice of taking chances, changing things up, making things different. And the fifth step is asking for help, getting support and encouragement, and celebrating successes with others. And so that's all that I'm going to say tonight about taking chances to create change. And I'm just going to go to some of the questions that were submitted to the OKclarity community. The first question was, how can we know when we are ready to make a big change? That's a big question. How do we know when we're ready to make a big change is not an easy thing to just know. The thing is that every single change that we make carries some stress with it. Change is hard. Our bodies, our organisms, the world, the environment likes to keep things the same. That's what homeostasis is. And everything really is almost like fighting to keep things in balance and the same. So anytime there's going to be change, there's going to be some level of stress and agitation that comes with it, and some just normalizing or like adjusting to the change. So when you're making a big change, I think it's really important to just know that no matter how big or small the change is, it's going to come with some stress, and to get support around it. If you're making a big change and the stress that's coming up around it is more than the typical stress, there's like angst or like a lot of anxiety around it, that might be a sign that you need some additional support to help you work through whatever's coming up for you. It could be that there's something trauma related that's getting activated. It could be it's your nervous system sensing something that it doesn't want you to do. Or it could just be something that's coming up that is just available for you to work through in conjunction with this big change. So assessing the level of angst and anxiety that's accompanying the change will let you know whether it's something that you might need additional support around. The second question is, there's change we choose and there's change that chooses us. What's the best way to prepare ourselves for both? And that's a great question, a great way of phrasing it, that sometimes we choose change and change chooses us, which is really, I think, another way of saying that change is a part of life. It's happening no matter what. Whether we want it or not, change is happening. And so sometimes we can invite the change, we can initiate it, but whether we're initiating it or not, it's happening. So the more we can get used to acclimating to change, the better off we'll be. And like I said before, our systems are designed for homeostasis, but they're also designed for change. So we have a way of coping with it. We can regulate even with big change. The thing is that when there's too much change happening too fast and not enough time for us to metabolize it and digest it and process it, which often happens with trauma, we can develop systems internally, implicit systems that help regulate bring us back to homeostasis and regulate us when there's a lot of change. And the goal, though, is that we regulate how we balance out with change rather than an implicit system regulating us. So for example, if there's a lot of change that happened in our lives and that created a lot of anxiety as maybe children, we may have developed a system that internally brings us back to homeostasis by activating like a depressive episode, because that helps bring down that activation and that anxiety. But when that implicit response comes up and it brings in this depression or maybe shame, it can sometimes do too much. It could downregulate us so much that we have no energy to engage with our lives. So the goal is for us to move out of this implicit responses to creating homeostasis with change to explicit responses where we can intervene and have a reaction to change and balancing it out with homeostasis. And the way that we do that is by getting accustomed to taking chances and getting very reflective of how our system reacts to change and learning how to accept and integrate and metabolize change in our lives. The third question that I have here is, which I think was answered or addressed earlier, but I'll just go over it again, is when taking chances, how do we mitigate risk? How do we know how much risk we should have and how much is too much? So I think I addressed that earlier when I said that it has to be something that's safe enough, unless it's life-threatening and you have no other choice. Then if you have no other choice, then you take the risk that you need in order to save life. But I think that often that needs to be consulted with experts or people who know a lot about, who can help you see what the options are. But in general, if something is too risky, meaning that it's likely that this choice will lead to a dangerous outcome, then it may not be a risk that is worth taking. And it may not be a risk that's conducive to facilitating integration, that taking risk can be a really positive thing in helping move forward in life. So I think I covered everything that I want to cover for tonight. I'll wait another moment if anyone has any last minute questions that they want to ask that I could try to address. If not, you could submit more questions to OKclarity, or you could send them to me, Esti Marcus, LCSW. I think someone posted earlier that they're moving. Moving is a big change, and I think it's listed as one of the most stressful changes and that a person can go through. So I wish you a lot of just peace and ability to stay regulated in this big change that you're making, and just to know that moving is hard. Even, I always laugh about this, that sometimes, you know, when I was younger, there were different rooms in my home, and sometimes I would switch bedrooms. And even moving from one bedroom to the other created some anxiety in me, because even the simple change of moving from one room to the other, one bedroom to the other, and getting used to a new space can create some anxiety. So just know that with change comes some acclimating, some adjusting, and to give it some time. And that the more we take chances in safe ways, the more it will feel like it's something that is accessible. It's something that we can do. And just one last point that I want to make is that when you're looking for help and therapeutic healing, I think it's really important to look for someone who encourages and helps you feel safe enough to take chances. And so that's all for tonight. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.